joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And we're here every Sunday. And if you miss something, go to the website, livingyourinspiredlife.org, and tune up, and get caught up on everything you've missed and just get inspired to grow and expand. So today I'm deeply grateful to have this woman on air with me. She is an author of many books. The first was Random Acts of Kindness and Attitudes of Gratitude. And she has a new book out that I'm already recommending to clients. I got to tell you, it's a great book. It's called How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For. I'd like to welcome MJ Ryan. Thanks for joining me, MJ.
So happy to be with you today.
I got to tell you, when I saw the title of this particular book, having been through a change I didn't ask for, or at least that's what I thought at the time, that whole title just caught me. And this book, for everybody who's listening, this book is just chock full of, you're like the major researcher and integrator and investigator and collaborator. Everything that's in here, it's just chock full of not only information, but tools to help you in any area of the journey of going through the change, a change, not the change, but a change. And I'm deeply grateful for this book.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I love to collect ideas that I find useful and then offer them to other people. So
I got to ask you, do you ever sleep? Because the information in this book is like 3 lifetimes full of reading.
I'm a very fast reader.
You must be. It takes me days and days. So you must be, because I was just like, wow. So one of the things you said in your book is that there's 7 truths about change, and I'd like us to go over those for our listeners.
Sure, absolutely. So the first one, and I think I want to kind of start by saying I wrote this book because I went through so many changes that I didn't ask for, and I did it all wrong, and I wanted to learn how to do it right. And as I worked with people, I wanted to help other people go through change more easily.
Well, I don't know where you were 3 years ago with this book, because, man, I when I started this change I didn't want, I could have really used some of the insights here. And I hear what you're saying. When you have to navigate some profound changes that you don't want, it is so hard to do it by yourself.
Yeah, and so the first truth is that change is really the only thing that we can count on. The Buddhists call it impermanence. But that's all they're saying when they talk about that everything is impermanent. They're just saying it will change. And understanding that helps us not resist it. I was just working with a company, a team, actually on Friday, and I was describing this process of adapting that we all need to learn as times have gotten more and more changes, more and more rapid. And this guy said, but that means like we have to be able to change on a dime and be able to constantly respond to the environment and change. It's like, yes, that's what's happening. That's what I believe that our ability to change is the number one survival skill of the 21st century.
I agree with you, MJ. I think that, and so many people are having the conversation about, wow, time has just sped up, but it's part of the thing that's pushing us to adapt, yeah?
Absolutely. So people are talking about what is called a VUCA world.
What's
Volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous. Meaning it's going to keep changing. There's going to be big changes. We can't predict what they're going to be. And they're not talking about it in our own personal lives. We're talking about it in the world at large. And so as the world, we as individuals meet up with the world at large, then that makes change even more.
Wow.
Happen.
I love that. Can you say those words again? Volatile?
Uncertain. Chaotic, meaning not predictable.
Right.
And ambiguous, again, sort of like unclear as to what direction it's going to change in.
Oh, my goodness, that just describes the last 3 years of my life. And ambiguity is a hard one for people to handle. And in your book, you give tools on how to handle some of that and to begin to clear the clouds and the chaos.
Yes, and so absolutely. The other one I want to talk about in terms of the other truth about change that I think is very tied to this first one is that it's not personal, actually, what's happening. So whenever anything happens to us that we're at the change we didn't ask for, we always think, why me? Why is this happening to me? I'm the only one. We have a tendency to think we're the only ones that is this terrible thing is happening to, and therefore it's personal, some personal. And of course, on a certain level, it's personal. It's happening to you. That's personal. But it's not necessarily, and most likely not, a fault of your own. So, for instance, my sister's house burned down after I wrote this book. Well, she happens to be the seventh person close to me whose house is burned down. It's very common. Fires are actually very common. And so she didn't do anything wrong. Her husband went on the sitting lawnmower, mowed the lawn, put it in the garage, and it was faulty, and the house burned down.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah. So, but we tend to think, why me? The universe is picking on me. But no, it's just random and chaotic, as we just said for truth number one, and so it lands on you sometimes. I have
a quote about the not taking it personal, because I'm raising my hand. That's the thing I have done a lot in my life when stuff happens, when change happens. So what you said in your book is depersonalizing the change challenge, which I love that phrase, change challenge. You're facing, depersonalizing the change challenge you're facing gets you out of a sense of failure and frees up your thinking to be as adaptive as possible. That, to me, having navigated some pretty profound changes, that's the key, is freeing up your sense of thinking. Yes, exactly. And then that takes us to the other truth about change when I really researched it, and that is that our thinking, or our brain, is not always on our side in change. And there's really two reasons. One has to do with the thinking part of it, which is primarily called our neocortex. It likes habit. It likes to do what it's always done. It doesn't want to do it differently. And the reason is because habit is an energy conservation. The brain uses more of the body's energy than any other part. So it's always looking for ways to conserve energy, and the biggest way is to have habit. So when we go through our lives, we don't have to think about it, but change forces us to act differently, to stretch beyond where we were before, and that takes energy, and it doesn't want to do it. That's number one. The other is that we have these primitive part of our brain that comes from our reptilian and our mammalian past. So when that works against it because it's just looking for potential threat, and when it perceives as a threat, it turns on the stress response. And anything that's new or different or could possibly be bad, it thinks is a threat. And part of what it's scanning for is, can I count on this? Is this? Part of what it scans for is certainty. Certainty is safe because then it's predictable. But uncertainty turns on that sense of threat. So we then go into fight or flight. So I like that you're talking about the brain part, because really I thought that my reaction to all this change stuff, I kept trying to do it, quote unquote, right, yes. Make it work. All right. And part of it, when we're talking about, one of the things, the chapters in your book is your thinking is not always your friend.
Yeah.
That caught my attention because I kept thinking about it, trying to problem solve it,
yes.
and or thinking about it with running the story of the trauma and drama and the stress and the this and he said, she said, and thinking, thinking that was going to be helping me get through this change instead of making me more entrenched in the thing I really needed to let go of.
Right. So there's two things. We're kind of sticking them together. So let's look at them apart. One is that the process of adapting to a change is actually really easy. You recognize the change that's happened. You accept it. Yeah, it's true. You then have to expand your thinking about how to deal with this new reality.
Yeah.
And then we get into action, right? So if I say, we're going to go to the movies tonight, and then I call you up and say my kid's sick and I can't go, you say, okay, that's fine, and you find something else to do. When it's something tiny, we go through this process very easily. We don't even notice we're doing it. But when it's something hard or when it's something we don't like, we can get stuck in any one of these places. The first thing is we cannot notice the change is happening, right?
Okay.
So when my guy came to me out of the blue one day and said, I don't love you anymore, I'm leaving, goodbye, after 14 years, I didn't even notice that change was happening until that point, until I got hit over the head, right?
Yep, that happened to me.
Right? Okay. Then, so that's one. We're oblivious to what's actually happening. Second is we don't want to accept it. It can't be true. It can't be true. This can't be happening. That we can get really hung up there. Next is that we can understand that it's happened. We can accept it, and yet we can't think in new ways because we're stuck in the past. The brain, and that's kind of what you're talking about. We're stuck in how did this happen and why did this happen and how could I have avoided this happening instead of going, okay, it's happened, now what do I do, right? And then the last thing is we can know that we need to change. We can even know what we need to do, but it can be really hard, especially when it's something emotional, to actually get up off the couch and do it.
Well, so I'm kind of in that middle space personally, MJ, and I've accepted it and all that, but I haven't quite gotten to where I feel like I have the energy to move forward. And just to back up a bit, when you're in that place of recognizing that the thing you're oblivious to is actually happening, or the denial of the thing that's actually happening, when you get to that place of, okay, it's happening, it's really, in my personal experience and some of the clients that I've been coaching, the resistance to the change becomes larger than even the challenge. It becomes the challenge then, right?
Yeah, becomes the challenge. That's right, because you don't want to accept it. So part of what I believe, which I haven't seen anyone write about this, but my belief is that whenever there's a change we didn't ask for, something, especially something big, like the end of a relationship or the house burning down, you go through the grief cycle just like a death, because it is a death.
Yeah.
It's the death of a relationship. It's the death of a dream. It's the death of a belief. It's the death of a living situation, whatever, or all of those. So therefore, we are in that, and that denial, that bargaining, all the stuff that we talk about when we talk about the stages of grief. But we somehow often don't think that we should be feeling that way in these circumstances. But it's absolutely a death, and so therefore you will be in the grieving process.
And it happens when you lose a job, even if it's that you. I have a friend who just changed jobs, let's say it that way, from a job she had for 25 years to a different job. Now it's in the same company, right, within the same umbrella, but she's recognizing she's grieving the old job.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So there is a process of grieving that we have to acknowledge, and we have to be kind to ourselves, and we have to do all of the wonderful coping mechanisms about, self-care and tenderness and compassion and all of that. Absolutely. And we have to, part of what people have discovered is that we can mourn and move on. We don't have to do one first and then the other.
All right. And you talk about that in your book. It's this multitasking to get through the change we don't want.
That's right. And so you don't overwhelm yourself, especially at the beginning. But, one of the things that you can do even right away is, there's all this research into resilience, which is how do people bounce back from hard, terrible things. Well, it turns out they do 5 things. And they do them unconsciously, but we can learn, we who are not so resilient, or at least not born that way, can do them too. So the first is to be willing to learn and grow from what's happened.
Oh, that's a hard one for people, I gotta say.
I know.
I mean, I didn't. It was all about the other person. It wasn't about me changing.
Yep. So I have to be willing to learn and grow. So people who are resilient say, okay, so you could ask yourself, what can I learn from this, right?
Mm-hmm.
What can I learn from this? The other is to see it in a bigger picture, in a wider frame, and having a spiritual meaning. So some people it's about God. God doesn't give us anything more than we can handle, that kind of thing. Other people it's more about seeing it in that larger frame about learning and growing. But if you can see a deeper meaning beyond the moment of the suffering, then you can elevate it. Now, that one I think you need to save to the last. When my sister called me to say her house was burning down, that wasn't why I didn't ask her as the first question, what's right about this? What's the gift in this for you? I didn't. It's not the time for that question.
I think I would have to slap you if you would ask
me
exactly.
that. Yeah, she would have reached inside the phone and strangled me, right?
Yeah.
So, but eventually, at some point, when you're going through it, you got to ask that question, and when you ask that question, then you make meaning out of your suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, my sister, I didn't ask her then, but she's been through a lot of hard things, so she cycled pretty fast. I think within 6, maybe 8 weeks, she said to me, it's really great. I always wanted to get rid of all this stuff anyway, and now it's all gone. I can start all over.
Wow.
But so those are two. The other are more sort of day-to-day things, which are to be able to practice gratitude. When I wrote originally about gratitude, I was trying to figure out how to be happier, and I discovered that when you are more grateful, you're more happy because you notice all the wonderful things. But it turns out to be one of the key coping skills when you're going through change you didn't ask for.
To find the gratitude in the change I didn't ask for?
No, probably not the change itself. That's spiritual graduate school.
Yeah.
What can you still enjoy and appreciate right now, even though this terrible thing is happening? I learned that from my dad when he was dying. He was in the hospital. He was probably a couple of weeks from death. He was dying of emphysema, which is this horrible gasping death.
Oh, yeah.
And I was sitting there, and he was gasping. And all of a sudden, I just blurted out, Dad, is your life still worth living? I really don't know why I asked that question. What was I going to do if he said no?
Right.
But I just blurted it out. And he looked at me, and he said, I like to watch the ball game on TV. I like to read the comics in the newspaper. Sometimes it's easier to take a breath than others. My life is good.
Oh, wow. I got chills. Wow, MJ.
So he taught me. He was always one of my great teachers. And he taught me in that moment in which it's to say, no matter what else is happening, yes, really hard things with your teenager, or yes, you're going through a breakup, or yes, your company is going bankrupt. And what can you still, what's in your life that's good, what's in your life that you can enjoy, what's in your life that you can appreciate, and focusing on that as well. And when we do that, it widens our thinking. It makes us recognize that there's other stuff that isn't so bad. And we actually, whenever we think a positive thought, we flood our brains with a little bit of the feel-good hormone, so we feel a tiny bit better, and it makes it maybe a tiny bit easier to get up off the couch and do something.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that we can do this at the same time, because I think when I was going through my the last 3 years, the beginning part of it was so devastating that it was challenging for me to be grateful for something, and that's what I teach, that's what I practice all the time anyway. But during that deep dark time, it was really challenging. Yep. And I appreciate hearing now that it is something that we need to invite ourselves to do when we're at the beginning of that change challenge, is to see that we can do both at the same time. And actually, I would imagine it gets you through the change challenge a little faster and with more ease.
It was a little more ease, I would say. I don't know about faster. I don't know if we're totally in charge of the time. But I think that what happens is when the primitive part of our brain says this is a threat, then when the fight or flight mechanism turns on, part of what it does physiologically is reduce all of our awareness except for the danger or the potential danger. It does this because if a tiger is chasing you and about to bite you, which is back when this all was developed, you don't want to be looking at the flowers instead of paying attention to the tiger, right? that's a really good thing that it focuses on that. But the problem is when it's these more emotional and social things, and we're only focused on the threat, we're missing everything else that's going on in our lives.
Oh, that's a good point.
It becomes, everything else drops away. You have no friends, you have no work, you have no health, you've got nothing. You've just got this horrible day, this horrible, terrible thing that's happening to you from the end of this relationship, for instance. And so gratitude widens your view again, and you start to again see, well, yeah, this is horrible. And I do still have friends. And even though I can't feel great right now, I know they're there for me, or whatever.
Right.
So it widens your awareness, and therefore you recognize there's more to your life than just this one terrible thing.
Right. I appreciate you sharing that. So in the resiliency or finding out, developing resiliency,
Yes.
like in my case, I didn't think I had an ounce of it, but in developing it, then it kind of gives you a bigger overview of where you can go in those moments where the clouds break through and the sun shines.
Exactly. And I remember in the midst of my breakup actually first learning this. Somebody said to me, you should go listen to Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist teacher. And he talked about how when he was in Vietnam, he was always under attack. He had these orphanages, and they were always being bombed. The North Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese, the French, the Americans, everyone at some point he had been a quote-unquote victim of. And he was the happiest person I ever met. And what he talked about was how he would sometimes lying there after they'd been bombed yet again, the orphanage and the monastery, and they'd be outside. And he'd say, I would think about, what can I count on today? What can I count on today? And sometimes he said it was just that the sun was shining.
Oh, gosh.
And he said I would look up and I would smile at the sun, that I could count on that today. And I used that at the beginning of my real challenge with my change, unexpected, is to say, what can I count on today? What can I appreciate today? And when my mind would go, I would say, well, I still have a house. And then my mind would go to, but I can't afford it, and then it's all I would go, today I can count on it.
Right.
And that focus on today, what we can count on today, really, really helped me through the unknown.
So in your book, too, this is the thing that caught me in the first part of the book. The last chapter of the first part, you say your future is built on a bedrock that is unchanging. So let's talk about that for a minute, because when you're in that change challenge, especially in the beginning, there ain't no future.
Yeah,
it's all dark.
It is. And a wonderful, wise teacher told me this incredible story about her grandmother. So her grandmother was a Russian Jew, and way back in the early 20th century. And she, the Cossacks would come into the villages for fun, and they would, torture people and tear apart their houses. And they lived in these little stone and brick huts, basically. And they would run into the forest, and the Cossacks would come and trash everything. And then after they thought they were gone, they would come back. And what you would do when you came back is you would look for the whole brick that you could start to build your house again.
What, you mean a brick that was not broken and...
Yes,
exactly. Oh.
And then you would build this, you would start again with the bricks that you found that were whole. And so I love that story, because that's what, when horrible change happens, it's just like that, right? The Cossacks have come through and destroyed everything. And that's how it feels. And so the bricks that we have to move into the future are things that cannot be taken away from us, and that are our essence. They have to do with what do we love to do, what we're good at doing, what our talents are, what our values are, what really matters to us. Those bricks are the things that we rebuild, whatever our lives out of whatever has happened.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing that story, because I really didn't. And I read the story in the book, but I still was like, I mean, somewhere within me, it resonated, it made sense. But now it really makes sense, because, again, going through that change challenge, and I work with clients, and just to get them to say, okay, so what is it that you know that's true about yourself right now?
Yeah.
It's sometimes very hard to say, I know that this inner whatever, I have strength or I have...
Because I don't think you can believe it at the time. That's why I say a bedrock from the past. Because when someone's in that state, I don't ask them about how they feel now or what they have now. Because you don't feel like you have anything.
Right.
I say, tell me a time that you went through a change. Tell me about a time in the past where you went through a change and you made it. And they tell me, da-da-da-da. And then I say, what qualities, so we start to parse out what qualities did you exhibit in that change that you have now?
Okay.
Or that you've always had.
What qualities?
So you can, the brain likes proof.
Yeah.
If I just say, oh, you're wonderful, oh, you're great, you're going to get through this, not a problem, it doesn't do anything for you, right?
That's right. My brain goes, liar.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
a liar.
Liar, liar. Yeah, exactly. But if I asked you to tell me a time of any change, small or big, and how you got through it, and what you developed in yourself as a result, then you have the proof.
So then that becomes the whole brick.
That becomes the whole brick.
The what you did in the past and how you reacted.
And and you may have reacted a lot poorly, and you may have, but you did some things right too. What were they? And what qualities in you did you always have? So for me, for example, the quality that I have that gets me through anything and has gotten me through my life since I was a very tiny child is understanding other people, understanding the situation. That's my key brick. And so, but sometimes when something's hard, I get disconnected from that, right?
Right.
So also, when I'm going through right now with my kids, that I forgot that I have understanding. So if I remember, oh yeah, I do have it, I look back and I remember, yeah, I got this. How can I use that here? How can I use that right now? How can I be more understanding of myself in this moment? How can I be more understanding of her in this moment? Like that.
MJ Ryan, we're having a great conversation. Her book is How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For. And this is Living Your Inspired Life. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Susan Burrell from Living Your Inspired Life. I always find it easier and more fun to expand my life by being connected to open-hearted, like-minded people committed to being on the same path I am. If you feel the same way, I suggest you visit a Center for Spiritual Living. There are wonderful communities in Ventura, Ojai, Santa Barbara, Oxnard, Pleasant Valley, Camarillo, and Westlake Village. You'll find terrific people, great information, and more tools to help you live the life you were born to live. So go to csl.org to find a center near you. That's csl.org for a center near you.
And welcome back to Living Your Inspired Life. I'm Susan Burrell, and you're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And I just got to give props to Tom Spence, my sound engineer, who finds the right tune at the right time. So I just want to say thank you, Tom. So today we're having the conversation about how to survive change you didn't ask for with author MJ Ryan. So MJ, we've just talked briefly about the 7 truths about change, and now let's talk about what do you do about it? How do you like make your life work when you're going through that change challenge?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things the research on resilience is that they used to think some people were resilient and other people weren't, and so they studied these resilient people. But then they realized, oh, wait a minute, everyone can be resilient. And we can just grow these things in ourselves. And one of the things that people who are highly resilient do is they reach out for help.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They reach out for help immediately. I'll never forget when I got dumped for the first time in my life. I was in high school. I was friends with these 2 teachers of mine. I happened to know where they lived. I actually drove. I was a senior. I got in the car, and I drove 3 towns over, and I parked myself they weren't even home. I parked myself on the stoop until they arrived.
Wow.
I was so desperate that I just said, I can't get through this by myself.
And I know for me, so my entire adulthood has been about creating support groups. And generally, I had a mom's group because we all had kids. Some of us were working, some of us weren't. How do we take care of our little kids? That kind of a thing. And I've always done support groups because not so much for them, but for me, because I operate better in relationship where I can have somebody to interface with and bounce ideas off of and get reflection to what's going on.
Exactly.
So important.
Yeah, and so when you're going through a change you didn't ask for, it's not do you need support, but what kind of support do you need? So you're talking about support from a group of people going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Other support might be therapy. It might be we need financial support. You need someplace to live. I mean, what actually do you need, right? And making it be okay that you need it. It's part of to me, part of the cycle of life. When I was in that spot, people helped me. And now when I'm not in that spot, I can help others, right? So it's a way that because we are truly interdependent. And so it's important, and people can get really stuck on, I shouldn't need help, I shouldn't ask for help.
I should be able to do it by myself.
Yeah, but when it's something like this, it's not healthy to try to do it by yourself.
So what about the people that have, the shame or the regret or the worry? There's something there to me about those kinds of qualities, worrying about if I keep bugging my friends, I'm worrying about it, I'm going to overextend my welcome type of thing.
Yeah. So part of what you can do is ask.
Mm-hmm.
Part, is this okay with you? And then trust that it's true.
Right.
I just read this fabulous thing recently about how to deal with different emotions. And shame is all about revealing what you're ashamed of. Talking about that which you're ashamed of. Shame is lessened when we stop hiding it, essentially. And so the fact that you say, I feel ashamed that I need to ask you for help, and I feel like I'm imposing that, just the saying of it will help bring it out.
Yeah, it's very humbling at times to ask people for help when you're in those extreme change challenges, whether it's a job loss or a relationship loss or a home. And the moving into that place of humility is so uncomfortable for people. And I'm raising my hand. It was hard.
And recognize that people who love you, who care about you, they want to be able to give to you. So in fact, they're thinking, oh, good, finally, because I'm sure we're all super helpers and we're helping them every minute of the day, and so finally they get to give something back.
Yeah, and they're grateful for being able to do that.
Absolutely. So that's the number one thing. Get help. That would be absolutely, to me, the most practical thing that you could do in the very moment. That's like a right away thing. I think that another completely important thing you need to do is to, this kind of goes to the shame thing again, is really recognize that this actually could have happened to anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, maybe there is some responsibility you need to take for not being the perfect partner or the perfect parent or whatever, but that's part of what I think we always learn in shame. We always have an opportunity, I guess it's the right word, to recognize that we're in the boat with millions of other people who are in the exact same situation.
Right.
Whether it's relationships, parenting, illness, loss of job, financial troubles. We're in the boat with millions of other people who are just caught up in the same kinds of dynamics that much of which is beyond our control. And so we can widen our hearts. We can open us to even greater compassion for not only ourselves but for everybody else who's in the same circumstance.
Which actually I think is kind of why we're all here on the planet at this time, is that it's about opening our hearts and being self-compassionate as well as compassionate of others and knowing we're connected. It's at least in my experience of the challenge that I went through, that is a lot of what I learned is like, wow, it's even more than I thought. I'm so connected to so many, and it's all about this love and compassion and not about this judgment and this whatever.
Exactly.
So let's dig even more deeper into the application things that you have in your book that are, I think, pretty awesome. So you talk about becoming a change master, and that includes, besides accepting it, expanding your options.
Yes.
And then taking actions. So,
well, I think, yeah. So in order to get, depends on where, this is a cycle, right? So it depends on where you are in the cycle. But originally, I think what happens is so many of us is that we get focused on why is this happening? Why did this happen? Right? And the why question takes us to blame. It's my fault, it's their fault, it's the universe's fault, whatever. But we can get spun around, and you described it. You can get really, really stuck in the why, right?
Oh yeah, and some people live there for the rest of their lives.
Exactly. And so I really recommend that when you catch yourself asking why, you can do it one time. Try to see any information for learning, for growth, for the future, fine. But then you're going to ask the question, okay, it has happened. What am I going to do about it?
Right.
It's the what, the future question. Now what am I going to do? Change masters go through that cycle faster than other people. They go through they have the upsetness, they feel bad, whatever, and then they get into action faster. They go, all right, now that's over, so I got to figure out what's next.
Okay, I have a question about that before you proceed,
Yeah.
MJ, because I know people that what they do in going through the why, and I hear you, I'm with you about just ask it once, because if you keep asking it, you just live there. But what about the people that go from the why immediately to what am I going to do about it, and they haven't even experienced all the emotional grief cycle things? It's almost like they bypass it. I've seen people do that, and then 10, 20 years down the line, they're having a breakdown because they didn't address it when it happened.
Well, I think we address what we can
Mm.
and when we can. I mean, I have a darling, dear friend who her son died a couple days after he was born. And heart infection. She went on to have 5 other children before she realized that she had never grieved the death of her son, right? And so then she did. And then, yes, part of her said, why did it take 20 years? She wrote a beautiful, beautiful book about it. And she could only get at it by reading other people's stories of grief first. And so that's what she did. That's what she couldn't do it any other way, because otherwise she wouldn't.
Okay, so then just to get from the why into the what am I going to do next phase of moving through your change and mastering it, what do you suggest?
Well, I think you just say, okay, so now what? So what do I need to do, right? And it just depends on the circumstance, right? Now what? And again, we have to expand our thinking. What will give you a sense? So part of what happens in the fight or flight response in humans is we get threatened by 5 categories of relational things. One is status. Is my status going up or down because of this thing that's happened to me?
Oh, are you talking about my how people see me?
Yes, how people see you.
My
Certainty.
reputation.
So the acronym is SCARF. This is the scarf we do not want to be wearing.
Uh-huh.
The first is status. The second is certainty. I thought this was forever and it wasn't, right? So that almost always gets triggered in change we didn't ask for. The next is autonomy, so which is freedom. Am I free to do what I want? Well, not necessarily. This change may have totally taken that away. R stands for relatedness, which is this person a friend or an enemy? I used to think they were a friend, but then they did this terrible thing, and now I think they're my enemy. Mm-hmm. And then the F stands for fairness, which is this fair or not?
Wow, that's a great one.
So depending on the situation, we can trigger it in any one of those places. But typically what I see is that people have their sense of certainty, and often their autonomy is taken away.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that helps a lot at the beginning, and this has been shown by research, is by figuring out what I can't control can't control the fact that he left me or that my house burned down or whatever. What can I control right now? So claiming back some autonomy, claiming back some certainty because you're driving it helps a lot. I know in the downturn, people lost their jobs. I worked with these guys who were these big, high marketing executives, and they would do things like decide once if they got fired, they would decide they're going to become a triathlete, right?
Yep.
Or see women do it all the time. They're going to change their hair color,
Right.
and it's an attempt by our psyches to get to be in charge of something, to be in control of our destiny, at least to the degree that we can be. And it's one of the key coping mechanisms at the early stages of change that have been shown to be highly effective. What can I control? What can I be in charge of now? And actually, so first action might be going out and doing those things that reclaim that sense, or at least a little bit.
Right. I have tons and tons of bags that I've taken to Goodwill because I keep cleaning out my closets.
Exactly. Because you can do that no matter what. You can
Yeah.
feel like, I am building my life. Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's all about what can I control, even though the rest of this around me is out of control, out of my control.
And then what?
So, well, again, it depends on the circumstances. But another thing that is incredibly helpful is to help other people, even right at the beginning. As soon as you can crawl off the couch, how can I help other people who are either going through this or I had to pick a different thing. I couldn't pick somebody. I couldn't possibly help someone who was at the end of a relationship because I was too much of a wreck.
Right.
But what I did instead was I delivered food to people with AIDS for 2 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was like, when I did that, I felt like, again, it's kind of like, yeah, the rest of my life is messed up, but look at these poor people, how they're suffering, and how I can at least help out in this little corner of the world. So generosity, as well as gratitude, is something else that we can start to do even immediately that has been shown over and over again to have really positive effects for people who are dealing with things difficult.
Right. And it helps to begin to open up your perspective, yeah, of
Yes.
how you're seeing things. It helps to open up that creative function of your brain.
Yes, exactly. You go, oh, wow, yeah, I kind of like this, or I don't like this at all, so I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed during this change challenge of my own, the current one, is I got to redefine myself. I got to really look at who am I now and...
Yeah, what do I like and dislike?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of that comes from the past, but some of it is also you get to really get to make it up now. I have a dear friend of mine who actually is my tenant now. She rents out my pool house, and she's discovered after 29 years of marriage that her husband had been having basically another marriage with someone else for 15 years.
Oh, good grief.
I mean, that's quite a change you didn't ask for.
Right.
And, she's 3 or 4 years into it now. So she's past the initial shock and, off all of that part. But she said he would never believe it because I was always the messy one and tossed everything out and I never cooked it. She said, I keep this place so clean. I just love order. She said she's cultivated these aspects of herself that she never had before when she lived with him.
That's hysterical because that's exactly what I've done. I was like, wow, I like this.
Yeah, exactly. And so we do get a chance. Change always invites us to not only use the resources we have from the past, but also invites us to grow new things and new abilities and new capacities and new interests and everything.
And and develop ourselves. It's almost like it's a maturation process, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Yes.
And I think if we can look at change from that POV, then maybe it's less threatening. Or I don't know.
I think it's horrible. I mean, come on. It's horrible to go through. It is. I mean, it's awful. We don't want it. We didn't ask for it. It's terrible. And we can do it. I mean, that's the piece. It's like, yeah, you know what? But we strap on those shoes and we start walking towards the light, even though we keep saying we can't possibly do it and we'll never be able to survive, but we do.
Yeah. So let's talk about, because a couple of the topics in your book caught me was hedge your bets, create necessary reserves, envision your next chapter, which is really challenging.
Yeah. So let's talk about create the necessary reserves.
Okay.
that's something that I think is really crucial. I'm talking about self-care there. So when we're going through something we didn't ask for, you notice you're more tired?
Oh, exhausted.
Yeah, and that's because your brain's having to work harder to think differently and behave differently, and because of all of the emotional process, which is draining because it's happening below the surface even when you're not consciously aware of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So so having the stamina to do what we need to do is really important. And so in the book, I give a model for looking at yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and looking at how am I. It comes from high-performance athletes. Olympians, for instance, they train really hard and then they rest the next day. You can't actually train really hard every day because then you don't build muscle. You tear it down on the days if you don't rest. So this model says we need strategies to exert ourselves and we need strategies of recovery. And so I ask people to look at where, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you exerted mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, and what are you doing to recover from those things? And it often helps people to recognize, well, I'm doing some things, but I could be doing others in different aspects of my life.
MJ, I'm so grateful. That gives me huge permission to keep taking my naps in the afternoon.
Absolutely. Does that help you recover all 4 dimensions? I bet it does.
I'm going to start paying attention to that. All I know is that at certain points I just got to lay down, and I think that's so. I love this, the not even pushing yourself, creating the stamina and
because the change is pushing you.
Exactly.
The exertion doesn't. In the case of change we didn't ask for, the exertion is coming forced from the outside.
Right.
But therefore you need all these recovery strategies, and different people recover differently. I have friends who go, I run, and that recovers, and I'm like, if I did that, I would be dead.
Yeah, me too.
Me, it's lying around, reading novels, and lying in hot tubs. That's what I do, and it covers all of those.
Right, right. So, okay, and then what about this hedging your bets?
Well, I think that's more on the practical level.
Mm-hmm.
That's about. I guess the way that I like to think about it is when there's a lot of upheaval. Many of us still want to do this sequential thing. Step 1, I'll do this. Step 2, then I'll do that, and I won't look at that unless this step falls through. And
I got to say, MJ, I don't see anything wrong with that.
So part of what the problem is, what if that does fall through? It's like, especially so part of what I encourage people to do is to do some simultaneous things. So this is, let's say it's about getting a job or figuring out a new place to live. Sure, you think, like this is me, I thought I had to live in the same town that I lived in before because I wanted stability and da-da-da-da. I had all these great rationales for it. And I went out and bought the worst house, and I lived in misery for 3 years there because I regretted buying it every minute that I was there.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was nothing wrong with that strategy, but I should have probably also said, let me go look at some places, other places. Let me think about, remember I always said I didn't like to live in this town? And I wanted to actually go elsewhere. Maybe I should check other stuff without just being so grasping to the one thing. Right? So let me go and figure out if there's some other options that might work. And what about that idea about renting or whatever? So just it's about exploring more than one option so that you can really make sure that you're not just falling into something because it's the easiest. Although that might be the best thing, depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, I have several clients. They like to do things very linearly, and whenever I encourage them to put more irons in the fire, it confuses them. They're like, how can I do that? Because really, this is what I want. I'm like, yeah, but you need to look at as many options as you can to see which one is the best fit for who you are now.
Yeah, I have a client who's really trying to break into fame, and she's doing more than one thing, and I think it's really smart because you don't know which pathway is going to actually work, especially with something that's so high stakes and challenging to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then what about the last couple of pieces of your book is taking action, which is what we're kind of talking about now. But in the taking action section, I noticed there were several places where you talked about hope.
Yeah. So I think, the thing about taking action is that it takes energy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so partly we have to be ready to be in that spot, but hope is the energy that keeps us going. Right? I hope this is going to get better. I hope that this is going to, that this will be the right place or the right person or the right circumstance. It's like hope gives us energy. So that's why, and sometimes it's hard to have, but it is an energy that can be incredibly useful. And that's why one of the key number one thing of people with resilience is the other that we didn't talk about is they believe in a positive, better future.
Okay, they believe in, I got chills when you said that, they believe in a positive, better future.
So I don't know how or when, but things are going to get better.
Okay, one of my mantras continues to be, and my son told me this, no matter what, everything's going to work out. No matter what, everything's going to work out. My 20, well, he was 18 at the time. He said, Mom, don't worry. No matter what, everything's going to work out. I'm like, who taught you that? Because I'm not experiencing that.
Yeah, and we need to make it work for us. Because I would have to say, I don't know when or how, but everything is going to work out. I would have to say that. I
don't know when or how.
Because I don't.
Right.
But I'm trusting that everything is going to work out. I remember when speaking of needing help, I went to see a therapist during my breakup, and my friend said, "You got to see a man because you've lost the man in your life, and you have to have a new man." So anyway, I did, and one of the things he said to me was, "It takes half as long to get over a relationship as the years it was to begin it."
Oh, that's good news, I guess.
Other people say, "Oh, that's depressing." So if it was a 14-year relationship, it'll be 7 years. I felt better. It was like, no wonder I feel so crappy even after year one. It's like,
right.
It's a process. I realized that, it's a process, and this process takes time, and it's an evolution. And so that helped me have hope that it was going to change, even though it wasn't changing right then.
So let's talk. The last piece of your book is about strengthening adaptability, which sounds like resilience to me.
It is.
So what are a couple of key things, because we're almost at the end of our time together, MJ?
Well, I think this is something to do after you've gone through the change.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to look back and go, how did I do it?
Oh.
How did I get through this? Because, and really make note of it, write it down, keep it somewhere, because you're going to need it the next time change hits.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant, because that's acknowledging that you made it through. It's acknowledging the skill sets that you've developed are unique and viable for you.
Yes.
And then, like you said, to write it down, I'm going to do that.
And because we tend, when we get into that fix of the fret, we tend to forget all of our resources.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Inner and outer. And so when we go, oh yeah, what did I do before? And you can also then look back on the other things. This is why I say early on, look back at how you've done it before, because those are things that you can also use. But maybe you learn new things this time because it's a different circumstance.
Right. Well, and I up until now, I would default to old behaviors and mechanisms that really never served me.
Right.
But I didn't know.
Yeah.
Now I can be more consciously aware of, okay, this is something that makes me more resilient. This is something that is going to support me. It's good. That's the brick. Those are the bricks.
Those are the bricks.
Hey.
Now you know where the bricks are.
Oh, wow. Thanks, MJ.
You're welcome.
I am so grateful that you joined me today. I've been talking to MJ Ryan. She is the author of How to Survive Change You Didn't Ask For. And I do have to tell everybody, there is a plethora of work in here that and exercises, and even I got to say one more thing, MJ, that you've got so many small little chapters, and each one of these little chapters is not only food for thought. You can chew on it for a while, and you can get some work out of it. You've got meditations in here, and how to do extra self-care, and how to begin to put yourself on track in terms of goal setting and defining your future. It's a great book, and I'm, as I said before we went on air, I'm deeply grateful for the work that you do and all that you've researched, because you made it so much easier for me.
All right, very good.
Thank you so much.
And take good care.
And I'm just going to finish with, and so it is, namaste.